Councilmember McAdams.
Here.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Here.
Councilmember Biala. Mayor Pro Tem Fisher. Mayor Delgado.
No changes to our agenda for closed session. So we'll move into closed session and return to open session at 6:30. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back to our open session. We've come from closed session and we have our attorney, Seth Petta, to summarize our closed session. Seth, if you and Syra can do the IT for you to speak, I think we're ready for you.
I think hopefully I'm audible. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead, Seth.
And I'm pleased to join you tonight on behalf of the city attorney. And I'm told that there are no items to report out from closed session.
So we had discussion on a few topics that are agendized and no reportable actions were taken. Thank you. Thank you very much, Seth.
I do see, Mr. Mayor, that we have at least one member of the council perhaps appearing remotely tonight. Have we already done the AB 2449 procedures? Or
we are all in person, the four of us. Our missing council person, Elizabeth Fisher, is not with us tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to ask Lupe if you could lead us in the pledge after a moment of silence. Would that be all right? So please stand for a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. We're being a good sport. Okay. And moving on, that was a segue into Poppy Month. Our American Legion, which is a pretty wonderful part of our community at Post 694, has a proclamation that we've prepared for them, or they prepared for us to give them. And our council member, Brian McCarthy, will present this. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my honor to read the proclamation. Before I do, it's not on our agenda per se, but I want to acknowledge that in May also is Military Spouse Day, Friday. And so, Lupe, thank you for all that you do in addition to this and working at the American Legion. I really appreciate you. So with that, I want to read this proclamation for May 24th, 2024, which is National Poppy Day in Marina. Whereas poppies are worn and displayed as a symbolic tribute to our fallen and the future of living veterans and service members. And whereas at the end of World War I, the American Legion family adopted the poppy as a symbol of freedom and the blood sacrificed by troops in war times. The symbolic use of the poppy comes from the poem In Flanders Fields, which movingly begins, "In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row," referring to the poppies that sprang up in the churned up earth of the newly dug soldiers' graves over parts of Belgium and France. And whereas the American Legion family has long utilized the red poppies as its official flower, symbolizing the blood shed by those who have served in our U.S. military, and the meaning and symbolism of the poppy mirroring the manner in which the poppy is symbolically showcased in England and Canada in celebratory fashion on their Remembrance Day, also known as Armistice Day and Poppy Day. And whereas wearing a poppy will unite citizens from across the country who decide to show their patriotism. And whereas May 24th, 2024 would be an appropriate date to designate as National Poppy Day. Now therefore it be resolved that Mayor Bruce Delgado and the City Council of the City of Marina hereby proclaim May 24th, 2024 as National Poppy Day and ask that all residents and visitors in Marina join in observing this day to honor every service member who has died in the name of liberty, freedom, and democracy. Thank you. And I'd love to get a picture.
And who will be presenting this or receiving this?
I'd like to present this to Lupe Martinez from the American Legion.
And if the commander would like to join as well, that would be great. Where's Andrea?
Yes. And Lupe, I'd like to say a few words.
And maybe you could both introduce yourself, the commander and the president of the auxiliary.
Thank you. My name is Lupe Covarrubias Martinez, and I'm the auxiliary president. I don't know why I get so emotional. I do every time. The president of the auxiliary unit of Post 694.
And my name is Joey Martinez. I am the commander there and also Marine Corps veteran.
Honorable Mayor and Marina Council members, on behalf of American Legion Auxiliary Unit 694, we greatly thank you for this proclamation in honor of National Poppy Day, which is commemorated the Friday before Memorial Day in remembrance of those who paid. I do it all the time. The ultimate price for our freedom, we must never forget. And as Councilmember McCarthy read of the poppy and how it was designated after World War I. As a member and president of Unit 694, I hold a special place in my heart for the parents, siblings, spouses, and friends of those who served. I can't help but think of all the men and women who have gone to fight for this great nation and did not return home. For National Poppy Day, May 24th, American Legion Post and Unit 694 will be distributing poppies like these that Post Commander Joey Martinez will be giving to you, and invite you and the residents of Marina to wear a poppy as a tribute to our fallen warriors. And donations are accepted for the poppies, and 100% of the donations received will go directly to help veterans and their families. While we are all guilty of celebrating the unofficial start of summer and encourage each other to have a great weekend, it is important to remember the reason for the holiday. Memorial Day is the day Americans set aside to honor those brave men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice defending our freedom. It is our duty to honor those sacrifices, to pray for their families, and to bow our heads in recognition of their service. The American Legion Post and Auxiliary Unit 694 would like to invite you, all of you, to our Memorial Day service on Monday, May 27th at 11 a.m. at the American Legion Post 694, located at 694 Legion Way here in Marina. And we greatly thank you for this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lupe, and thank you, Joey, for being commander and auxiliary president to all your officers. George and Alex and Sam and the others, Kathy McDougal. Thanks to all of them. You're a wonderful team. Example of what Margaret Mead said, nothing was ever done of importance that wasn't done by a few committed, dedicated people. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you for your passion, Lupe. Hope to see you on Memorial Day. Do you want to add any words, Joey? We don't get you very often, so we'd like to.
I'd like to thank the city of Marina very much for allowing us to come out here and do this every year. She's my wife, and that's part of the reason why she's crying, because men like myself and my fallen brothers and why we honor the Poppy Month hold a special place, and it should hold a special place in everybody's heart. It's something I tell my kids, that the freedom we have today was bought and paid for a long time ago by those men in World War I, even the war before those, but World War II, and not to forget them, remember them. So I ask that you remember every single day those who fought and those who didn't come back, because I know I remember them here, and I want you to remember them as well. And maybe you have somebody in your family that that served this country, just like this gentleman over here, right? Fellow Marine brothers. That's one thing. I was reading a quote just today about how the Navy, when you get out of different branches for 6 years, you maybe served for 6 years, but a couple of months, it's over with. You're readjusted back to civilian life. As a Marine, that never goes away. I'll be a Marine for the rest of my life because it's a title that I earned and I fought for. And, again, thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of this community and to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Joey. Thank you, Lupe. And you're welcome to stay, but you have other things going on anytime you want. Thank you. Now, Burger Night is every Thursday night?
Starting at 5.
5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Thursday night, Burger Night. And then what happens on Monday? Monday dinner. All right. Mondays and Thursdays night. Thank you very much. Take care. Okay, tough act to follow. Council and staff announcements. Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. This Saturday is Dad's Read at the Marina Library branch, featuring our very own Chief Hopkins. The event's from 10 a.m. to noon. There's also pony rides, petting zoo, face painting, cookies from the Marina High School culinary students, and the Monterey County Food Bank. Their fresh vegetable produce truck will be there. So lots of fun activities, and thank you to the Friends of the Marina Library for hosting these lovely events. And then one more comment. I just wanted to wish my colleagues a wonderful trip to Korea. They're leaving tomorrow bright and early. And thank you for representing our great city, and safe travels.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. A week from today, Tuesday, May 14th, is the Black African Heritage Ceremony for graduating students at Cal State Monterey Bay. It's in the Otter Student Union Ballroom at 6 p.m. And there is, I got an invite in my box with a QR code. The address is bit.ly/Black Affinity Ceremony, if anyone's interested. And then secondly, many people may not realize that the water district is a separate entity. It's not in the city of Marina's subject matter jurisdiction, but all ratepayers should have recently received what's called a Prop 218 notice. Looks a little bit like this, should have come in your mailbox. And it talks about where water rates are headed over the next 5 years. And so I encourage you to be on a lookout for that in your mailbox. And if you have any concerns, to reach out to the water district. And that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. I'll mention that this coming Sunday, May 12th, is the second Sunday of the month, and every second Sunday of the month, volunteers from Citizens for Sustainable Marina go to Lapis Road and they pick up 2.2 miles of roadside garbage. So anyone wants to join them, it's free pizza at 12:15 p.m. when the work is done. So it's from 10 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. And you just go to the intersection of Lapis Road and Del Monte Boulevard. You'll see a sign-in registration table and banner. And it's fun and good exercise. So that's this coming Sunday, May 12th. And then on May 26th, we have our last native planting event on Hilltop Park. It's a city park under construction to open soon. And the landscaping, a lot of it is done by volunteers. And we'll have live music and free lunch and snacks for all the volunteers on Sunday, May 26th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the junction of 9th Street and 4th Avenue. So it's on the forward portion of Marina, large sand dune. And on top of that is where we'll be planting on May 26th. So come join us. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since Andrea Willer is not here to announce any recreational things, she's gone today. Just wanted to make sure everybody knows that June 1st, Saturday, in about 3 weeks, we have the Marina Multicultural Festival, and I believe it starts at 10 or 11. I was trying to pull
I
it
think
up.
it's 11 to 3.
Yeah, 11 to 3. So we'd like to see everybody come out and celebrate. It's going to be a fabulous year for us. I think this is our 3rd annual, so hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, we'll move on now. Oh, staff announcements. Okay. So we'll move on to public comment, and there's 2 items you can comment on. Anything that's on the consent agenda, which we're going to get to next, and anything else that's not on tonight's agenda already. Besides the consent agenda, you can comment on what's on your mind or announce anything that you'd like to. So this is time for public comment. We always start with those who are in person. Does anyone in the room personally or in person want to speak? Come on up if you do. All right, so let's go then to no one's rising to the occasion here. Now let's go to those folks online. We have one hand up. Let's go to Doug Yount. Hello, Doug. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to speak to item 10E1 on the consent agenda. Is that appropriate at this point, or does it wait till you go through and then you pull that item, or how does that work with the rules now?
Good timing, Doug. This is the right time to do that.
Okay, so let me just speak to that then on that item. First of all, I want to thank City Public Works staff or the maintenance staff particularly for doing the medians on 2nd Avenue. It looks very nice. Thank you for doing that. That's very important like it is throughout the community. Also, it would be nice, it sounds like it'd be nice to have 9th Street as well done coming up. Hopefully that will be addressed as well. And then also, as you may notice, as you turn from 2nd Avenue or Imgen Parkway down to 2nd Avenue, particularly on the westbound or the southbound lanes there on 2nd Avenue, that intersection's getting really, really bad. So hopefully that's scheduled for resurfacing, paving, and pothole filling soon. I noticed in the slurry schedule that looks great that there are a number of streets in phase 1C of the dunes to the east there that are scheduled for slurry. I think it's been about 8 or 9 years at least, maybe 10 now that those streets went in, and appreciate the city moving forward with slurring those on the schedule with the Measure X funds. The only question I have is the city has both the dunes has a CFD to pay for street maintenance and street lights and drainage. And also, but I was wondering how the CFD relates to the slurry program, and how does those two because it's sort of, it seems like there's dual programs there, and I was curious what the funding, how that worked, the interaction between the slurry program funded by Measure X and the CFD relative to the Dunes project. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll answer all the we'll address the comments when we're done with public comment. Anybody else would like to speak? Please raise your hand now. We'll give you a moment to do so. Let's go to Nancy Fortman. Hello, Nancy, and welcome.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I attended the presentation on the City of Marina Community Facility Needs Assessment on April 30th. And I just can't imagine any resident of Marina not wanting a new community center, a new city hall, a new public safety structure, and a new city chamber. They've been obviously needed for many years. The preliminary site analysis was quite interesting, and surely anyone in attendance could find issues with all of the sites, yet have a preference. But I just don't see the site selection as the main issue at this point in time. For me, the main issue is paying for these long-needed facilities. The suggested bond being brought forth by the council does not tell the entire story. What are the exact tax implications for each homeowner in Marina? What are the implied rent increases for the renters whose landlords will be paying increased property taxes? We are currently facing increased costs for food, gasoline, PG&E, insurance, and soon water. Can we seriously ask voters to support a bond? I would like the council to slow down and take time to research alternative ways to pay for these structures. Can we sell property, Abrams, Preston, or Perk Ponds, to help pay for these long-needed improvements? I feel like we are putting the cart before the horse just to get a bond on the ballot and not doing our due diligence to find alternative funding and to be more transparent with the citizens of Marina as to what the costs would be to build these facilities. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Nancy. Would anyone else like to speak who hasn't yet? To do so, just raise your Zoom hand. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And to both Doug and Nancy, our process here is to have you heard by our city staff and ask our city staff to connect with you as soon as possible. Lane Long, our city manager, do you have contact information for Doug and for Nancy?
Yes, so I'll reach out to both of them tomorrow.
Okay. Is it appropriate for any more comment from the city manager, or is that not our process?
I think if there was a schedule for upcoming further discussion on some of these things, then maybe just to mention that.
Yeah, that's a good point. We will be scheduling, probably not the May 21st, but the first meeting in June, additional discussions on the whole facilities and the bond, and including estimates of the cost impact on everyone.
All right. Thank you to everyone who provided public comment tonight. Okay, so now we'll go to our consent agenda. And does anyone have any brief questions or comments or wish to pull items for further discussion than that? Let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think I have brief questions or comments on 4 items, and then one item, I'm wondering that the mobile food vendor J1, if we should discuss even just tabling that. I would like a really meaty discussion on that.
Item J.
Yep.
And as far as your brief feedback on the others, let's, if you wouldn't mind, wait for Councilman Adams, which is like pull something that you're interested in. We'll just take it all at once.
Thank you, Mayor.
So we'll come back to Councilman McCarthy, but first let's go to Councilman Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to pull G2 and G3. And then I have comments on F, like rank 6 and G1.
F6. Okay, so let's go to your brief comments on F6 and G.
Sure. So F6 for the viewers at home is the adoption of the sixth cycle housing element. I just wanted to congratulate staff and thank staff for this incredible work. It's something to be very proud of. Per the packet, it was certified by HCD on April 11th, 2024. And so just many, many thanks. And then on G1, that's the approval of the MOU between the Marina Public Safety Management Association and the Marina Professional Firefighters Association. I wanted to thank both of the associations. Clearly, there's a lot of work that is done when going through these negotiations, time and effort. And of course, thank you very much for your service to our city.
Thanks again. Okay, now let's go to Councilor McCarthy, because I forgot what you might have had brief comment on that is not going to be pulled, but we
Yes.
will.
So that's not going to be pulled. F1, 2, and 3, kind of my comments are relative to all of those items. And
Okay.
then let me start with that.
Yes.
So really a question maybe for the city manager, but every time we kind of go through this every year, we talk a little bit about engagement, and oftentimes residents don't want to contribute more to these assessment districts. And so my question is, are we doing anything different to try to engage members of these assessment districts? When we send out, I think we send some notification, right? I mean, do we send kind of an FAQ like, hey, you live in an assessment district. This is what it means. These are your options. This is how you can become engaged.
Send them a notification, but we don't go into the other detail, the other part that you mentioned.
Okay, so I'm not asking for necessarily this round, but I'm just really wondering if there's any advantage to just giving that a shot. And if it's, I don't know if the notice has already been prepared for this year or not, but if it hasn't, maybe staff can consider just adding a little more color to that.
We could certainly do that. One of the things that we have talked on our staff in is perhaps maybe the next year, schedule a study session just strictly on these districts and really not only go on that, but really go over the big picture, why the monies are the services are going down. And we thought about that it's been about 10 years. It might be a good time to just schedule a study session, really invite everyone, and then just go through in detail, big picture of what's going on and options in the future for them. If the council's interested in that, we can certainly do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. And I have 3 questions on an item, so I'd like to pull that item because that's getting a little bit much not to pull it. And that is call for bids on 10E1 for the slurry seal project. We had a couple public comment questions, and I had a question from a resident regarding Elba Circle and Everett Circle. So I'd like to motion that we pass the consent agenda minus 10E1, which was my item, and 10F5, which was, I'd like to pull that for discussion. And then Councilor McAdams wanted to pull G2 and 3, and Brian wanted to pull J1. So my motion is to approve the consent agenda minus those itemized.
And then, Mr. Mayor, I did have,
Before you go on, let's get a motion. I mean, a second, and then.
A second.
Okay, go
And I
ahead.
have a question too.
I didn't get to finish my comments, but on M1, I have just some general comments too. I apologize. I probably made it sound like I was finished with my comments. So M1 is the appointment of the planning commission members, and I find that it's most appropriate to make my comments when it's a non-controversial item. In this case, there's 2 members and 2 slots, so it's an easy sell, yes. But as this council has heard me say before, I think that the appointment process could use some refinement and improvement. When I brought this up last time, I know city staff expressed some concern over the time and effort that might be involved in creating some new process. And I kind of reflected over that since that comment was made. And I just think that there's still some very easy ways that we can refine the process, including but not limited to interview panels that maybe are District 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and kind of rotate as we need to bring in new members. I have a lot of reasons for feeling this way. I'm happy to pull the item if you want to have a larger discussion, but I'm also happy just kind of sharing that with the council for now so that the council can continue to think about this when we do have a broader discussion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little bit out of tonight's topic to discuss process rather than just the two people we're appointing. So we can't go into it as you haven't got into it very deeply. So yeah, it's on the table. So in the parking lot, right, for us to bring up when there's time. Okay, thank you, Councilmember McCarthy.
If I can just respond to that, because what I would ask the city attorney is that, we're kind of being asked to approve these appointments. The process is certainly part of that. If we did pull it, it would be appropriate to have that discussion tonight, I believe. Does the city attorney agree or?
If you pulled it, I think you can cover some basic sort of questions to understand kind of how these individuals were essentially selected for these roles, and then just to understand that process and maybe give some direction to staff. But I'm not sure that a full discussion on, other processes that might help would probably exceed the bounds of what's noticed for this meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, before we leave that, can I make a comment about this issue?
Yeah, as soon as you have the floor. It's coming
Okay.
very soon.
Yeah, I'll just close by saying, as with any interview process, even, in our careers, right? Interviews are very imperfect, and reading the notes and trying to understand what transpired during that interview is very difficult for me. Again, in this case, it's not an issue because I don't have to choose between people. But when I do have to choose, it's a very difficult decision for me, and I think it just warrants some improvement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, let's go to Councilmember Biala.
So just to follow up on that issue, maybe there's a way we can have it on the agenda, because I have some thoughts about the kinds of questions that we ask. It's a very difficult process that is trying to be objective, but it's subjective. But I think it merits us pulling it and at least changing some of the questions. So can we recommend that we have that come back and then some of the volunteers from our council maybe can help look at that as opposed to staff, and then they can.
Yes, and just beware that staff is going to do their best, but we've been asking for new chairs for a year, and there hasn't been staff time to do that.
Right.
Now, in this department of what we're asking, they also have a to-do list, so we just have to.
Right. So that's why I was suggesting that we council people can volunteer to do a subcommittee to look at that.
That's a great idea. So I don't think tonight we can assign a subcommittee, but I think that Councilmember McCarthy and Councilmember Biala, maybe McAdams as well, but let's would be interested.
Okay. And then I had one other comment. I thought that Council Member McCarthy wanted to delay or table the item 10J1.
So we pulled that.
Oh, I see. Okay, it's pulled, so we can
Discuss it
later. Okay, got it.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the consent minus the pulled items. Did we have a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. We'll go to, with the four of us voting, we'll go to the first item, the citywide slurry seal. My first question is, I've asked this question to staff, I got a response, and it left me wondering, Elba Circle and Everett Circle are the streets I asked about and was told that they'd be done by this fall, but I don't see them on the slurry seal list. So I want to confirm with Edry if he's available, if Elba Circle and Everett Circle, which tie in together, are on the list or will be done by the fall of 2024.
Sure thing. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just for clarification, so this year we have 2 phases of road construction or road rehabilitation. The first actually being full reconstruction of roadways. Elba Circle and Everett Drive are part of that phase. So they're not a part of the slurry seal phase, which we're going out to bid now because slurry sealing in effect is more temperature sensitive. So we definitely want to catch the hot weather in the summer for the slurry sealing in the early spring. We can't really slurry seal into the fall. So the reconstruction will be taken to council for asking for advertisement on the 21st. We're working with the utility companies to fine tune their the valves and other facilities in the field before we take it out to bid. So reconstruction is coming along with Elba Circle and Everett.
Thank you for that clarification. And then we had a public question. Imgen and Second Avenue has gotten real beat up. Lots of trucks, lots of traffic. What's the status as far as addressing that?
We have Imgen Parkway, the various portions of that roadway coming up in 25, in 24, 25. So next year, we have microsurfacing coming on Imgen Parkway.
Okay, and microsurfacing is what is needed at that intersection that's rough?
Well, we'll be doing some dig outs and microsurfacing. So some road repair and resurfacing of the roadway.
Okay, City Manager Lane Long, did you have input?
Yeah, in addition to that, that's on our schedule, but I've asked our public works superintendent to look at that because it's become a problem. And so we're going to look at it possibly trying to expedite some of the work at that location.
Thank you. Okay, and then residents at the dunes pay an annual community facilities district CDF fee. And what is the relation to that funding and our slurry program that's being funded by Measure X in front of us?
Yes. So we're actually the bid itself will have an ad alternate for the roadways within the Dunes 1C. So all the Dune CFD streets will be paid through Dune CFD fees. All the slurry sealing being done on the dunes will be paid for by the dunes.
Okay, so the dunes roads that are on the slurry seal list in Exhibit A before us are actually not being funded by Measure X, but by the CFD.
Yes.
And then those dune roads that are needing to be reconstructed, they will go out for bid soon. And construction will be maybe completed by fall of 2024, and they'll also be funded by the CFD.
There are no streets in the dunes requiring reconstruction. All the dune streets under the CFD are slurry seals.
Okay.
So they're all
And
being
that's
covered by this.
okay. And that's a result of them being new streets and us doing the proper maintenance so they don't get so bad that they need more in-depth fixes. Is that correct?
You are correct.
Yeah, it's great. Good job, Edry, so much. Thank you. All right. So we'll go to the next item, which I think was pulled by Councilmember McAdams. And that is regarding the utility vehicle uplifting it to a command vehicle. Was that one of yours? Okay, I'm sorry. The next one. That was F5. Yeah, so let's go to G2 for Councilman. Yeah, we've done public comment on consent. So I'm so sorry. So G2, the agreement between Marina and Team CivX. Go ahead, Jenny, with your question.
Thank you. And actually, I pulled G2 and G3 really for the same reasons. I'm struggling with supporting the increase in these contracts just because I'm not necessarily confident the council is united with regards to moving forward, like effectively, efficiently, getting the bond measure on the ballot. I apologize that I didn't participate at the workshop. And I heard just a lot of great ideas and project designing and stuff that really is for me like 3 to 5 years out and not necessarily like the task at hand. So, I'm not necessarily sure how this is settled this evening, but I know, for me, it would be helpful for staff, to sort of like keep the council focused, keep us, what are we doing? What's the priority? And I understand the workshop was conceptual and, there was a lot of good conversation. But I do think it would be helpful for, some sort of tool to really keep the council focused and to just sort of have what staff needs from us. Because for me, at the end of the workshop, I didn't really think anything was done, quite frankly. I don't necessarily know what the output was of it. So I will support increasing these contracts very hesitantly. And I really would moving forward, like to hear a more sort of united and focused comments and actions coming from the dais. So,
So if, yeah.
City attorney has some input.
So just want to make sure that we keep the discussion focused on these two contracts. I know it's part of a larger discussion, but certainly keeping that sort of reference in mind that what we're talking about today are the two contracts related to the GO bond. So just making sure that we kind of keep it much more focused without getting too far out there.
Yeah, so it's hard to approve a contract if you have questions about whether it's appropriate to progress in this direction. So I think that input about whether we should do this contract or change direction or do something else, I think is appropriate.
Yes, I mean, what I'm saying is it should be framed in the context of these contracts. Yes.
Okay. So Councilor McAdams, if you have anything more to say about whether you think we should progress with these two contracts, you're welcome.
thank you, Mayor. And I absolutely want to. I think it's imperative for the city. And I think that the information that staff has brought and the consultants have brought, it's very clear that we need upgraded facilities and that we need the revenue to do that work. So absolutely, I want to move forward. I just want to be very mindful of the time, the very short time window that we have to do this work. And yeah, I mean, that's just where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and our attorney, if I'm bearing too much, but I just want to kind of tie in some of the concepts in that the bond measure is for looking at options for the city to improve our very degraded facilities. And in order to do that, we need money. And so we're considering the bond measure. But the bond measure cannot go out unless the public knows how and where we're going to spend the money. That therefore we have to have a discussion about where a community center, a civic center, police, fire department, all of those things will go. Otherwise, the public might have difficulties saying, I approve of the bond to get money, but I don't know where the money is going to be spent. So that's how it all ties together. And we can't, we have to have these discussions. And if we didn't have a consultant to help us look at the properties from an objective viewpoint and have the beginning of discussion in the community, then we're never going to get to all the other steps that for which this consultant was hired for. And so that's how I see it. It's a long process, and we have to, at the same time, have sort of a shorter trajectory in time to get this done by the election. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I've realized that somewhere in the last several months, we sort of dropped out the aquatic center and the sports center for these contracts to address. And I think the sports center was because we have other funding. But I want to make sure before we move ahead with these contracts that the city manager believes we have enough funding without a bond measure to pay for some of the sports center.
No, we don't. And I think you are correct. The focus got really on these critical facilities, but it was always part of it was also going to be to close that gap for the sports and aquatic center, which is roughly 15 to 18 million dollars. We have about 20 million, but we're still about 15 to 18 million short. And so the survey that is part of this proposal with Team CivX is going to talk about those facilities, including the sports and aquatic center, so that we can really get a sense from the community on what the priority projects are, what's their threshold that they're willing to pay, and at what threshold do we not, and which projects. So that will be part of our the continuing outreach and the survey.
Okay. And then does this contract include addressing additional ball fields at Preston Park or other locations?
No.
And is that because we have funding elsewhere that it's not in this contract?
Correct. That would have to come from impact fees and general funds. And yeah, I mean, you could put it on the ballot measure, but we have not discussed that previously.
Okay. So to get 67% or whatever it is that we need, I think it's going to be 67% unless citizens come up with something that they want to put on the ballot. There's a significant constituency that wants ball fields. And I remember when when the contracts went out for Measure X education, like where we are now, to pass countywide, they added things in that major constituencies wanted to get to the 67. Like they added 4TAG. Not everyone was in support of 4TAG, four-door recreational trails and greenways. That's a network of bicycle pedestrian trails. But they added that in to get a certain constituency, and they got it, and it helped them get to 67. So if this contract doesn't address those ball fields, do we have certain funding as an alternative to get that done?
In our last budget, the council had several more million. So I think we have 3 million set aside for the Preston Park ball fields. We have $1 million set aside just for Preston Park improvements. So we are working on that. And as we continue to acquire more impact fees, those can be allocated towards the Preston Park ball fields. But we could certainly, if the council wants, include that in our narrative that goes out to the public and see if that is a priority. So that's not a problem if the council wants to do that.
Okay. I think if we included it and found it to be extremely popular, we would either include it in the bond discussion after that point of learning that, or we would be more lit fire underneath us to find the money outside the bond. Okay, so if the contract addresses items that push it from 62 million up to close to 100 million, what would our options be?
Yeah, based on the previous survey, 100 million would not pass at all. And they still think the results of that survey are still pretty reflective of our community. So it's very highly unlikely. The threshold that we talked before, it was about 50 or it might have gone up to $60 million. And we had support at that point, and then it started dropping down dramatically. But our survey will test that threshold as it goes out again.
Okay. And we've had public comment saying, don't move ahead with these contracts. Instead, sell Preston Park. And then you've talked to some people that had that opinion, and I think that they understood and they're now more on board than they were before. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's a lot of issues that are associated with Preston Park. Number one, we don't know what the value, but it also has significant deed restrictions on affordable housing, and so what people perceive as a value is that value is lower. Preston Park contributes right now $2.5 million to our city's general fund. It's a critical tool as we diversify the general fund, where cities get to problems when you have up and downs with your economic cycles. When you depend too much on certain sources, that's when you get into problems, have to lay off people and cut back your services. And so Preston and Abrams are a unique source that's a very stable revenue source, and right now contributes $2.5 million. In addition to that, we are setting aside $1 million so that when that balloon payment comes due in 2026, that we've been acquiring to help us to buy down that loan, so that it'll ensure us that we can get an amortized loan. And so we've by the time 2026 gets here, we will have set aside about $12 million. And so so I guess what I'm saying with that is in addition to the $2.5 million of the general fund, it'll have the ability for another $1 million to contribute to the general fund. And so that project is a really stable revenue source to our general fund that helps to balance it. In addition, the rents there are not all the way up to market, and there's pros and cons to that. But there's a lot of long-term residents that would, if that were sold, they would lose their housing, and there's some issues that I think are associated with that. And then just from a perspective of the last thing that you want to do is start to sell your assets for really an ongoing or major cost like this. And I guess if you're desperate, it's kind of like your home. If you have a home and you have some needed improvements to it, you start selling off your garage, you just start selling off your bathroom. And at some point, you won't have any assets that generate a revenue for the general fund. And so that's probably not our best thing to look at, but it's certainly a discussion that we can have with the community. It is an asset. It has grown in value significantly since the city purchased it 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Yes.
I think that we're getting really off topic, and we are just to be looking at, although I appreciate the discussion about Preston.
Yeah, your point of order is well taken. So let's move on. I had you next. Do you have?
Well, just to follow up, I think that we're talking about site selection. That
Right. Your point of order is well taken. I agree with you.
Yeah, these are my comments now.
Okay.
Okay. That the contract under consideration under the topic is about site selection. And I don't want the public to now not understand that the bond measure has a whole process unto itself that includes many public hearings, that includes a survey, I think 2 surveys, in fact. So it's really 2 separate issues. So I just want to reinforce that again. And I would like maybe, and maybe this is still awry from the main topic, but it would seem that we should at least explain to the public that process as attached to this agenda item, so that we don't get confused about what's coming up related to the bond measure versus the site choice.
Okay. Thank you. I have a couple more questions about the contract, but I'll come back to me. let's go to Councilmember McAdams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking at Exhibit A, the scope of services, and
Which item, 10G3 or 2?
2.
Okay.
With regards to the ballot measure development, and I'm just wondering, one, if our city attorney or city manager, have you sort of started on that? Because what I think would be helpful is, and this is just a concept, to sort of have a generic one, which would be like a safe ballot measure. And then just in case, like plan B, in case we don't have everything done. So I just sort of wanted to hear your feedback on that. I mean, could the ballot measure, say it was for 60 million and, we had the pots of money designated, but not necessarily the site of the city hall or whatever. However, we would be allocating 25 million or whatever amount. I hope I'm making sense. So just sort of more of like just a general type of ballot measure.
So I can just answer the simple question. No, we haven't started to work on that, but maybe Lane, you can sort of discuss how the survey may narrow and address some of those options.
Yeah, it's a really good question. What we got to this point 2 years ago, so we actually have rough ballot measure language that's probably very, very similar. Our challenge in the ballot measure is going to be the number of words that you're allowed. And there's certain
75.
Yeah, and there's certain requirements under state law that you have to say certain things. And so it gets to be really challenging to put all that dollar amount and detail into every facility. And so, but that's good feedback to have, because that's something that we'll absolutely work with the city attorney on trying to figure out the language that encompasses what the council wants us to try to include versus the constraints put on us by the
Right.
law.
And so thank you for that. And that's sort of my point, is that, we're having all this discussion and we're not necessarily progressing for like 75 words, right? So really, if you think about it, how much of this detail can we put on the ballot anyways? Not a lot. And so for me as a voter, I would want to know, this is how many millions of dollars, this is how much it's going to cost me every year. And this is where the money's going to go to. And it's going to have to be pretty general. So that was just sort of my thought. I would encourage staff to begin that ballot measure development. Instead of it's June and you have 2 weeks or what, you know what I mean? Like, if we're going to have to be passing a resolution, and I'm sure we're going to have feedback and edits, et cetera, I think we need to start that sooner than later. Just because we have until July to bring to the voter registrar. So that would be my my comments. I'm happy to support both of these contract amendments. I won't support any more, though. I kind of feel like we're out of time, and this, I want to be prudent with our taxpayers' money and also staff time. So I'm happy to support these, and moving forward, I wouldn't support any additional.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Councilwoman McAdams. No, I'm sorry. No, it is. Yeah. Okay. I was thinking about Mary McAdams. So I had assumed, because we've had these discussions for 2 years now, and we missed the last election date, and there never is a good time to ask for bond measure money. But I had assumed that we did need to specify the site. You've stimulated an idea for me, is, do we really need to do that? Or do we just need to do an approximate, dollar amount? Now, the problem is that there is not only the bond measure description, but there will be other detailed information following that. And my question is, do the does the public, does the voters need to know that, or would they go ahead and vote for a bond measure without the knowledge of where we're planning to build this? That's the problem. And I don't know. And this is why we have this contract. But if we don't have to specify, and we think that people will vote for the bond measure with just an estimate of the amount of money it would take, regardless of the site, maybe that's the way to go. But I was under the assumption we needed to do that and that voters would not vote for something that they didn't have that specific. So I'd like to hear the comments from our city manager on that.
And you bring up a really good point, a good question. It is not a requirement on the ballot to have a location. This came out of one of our discussions with the public, one of the public meetings, and the public said, well, how can you vote on something if we don't know a location? And so that's why we went down the process of identifying locations. But I think, and I've talked with a couple of you offline, and I think your point is correct that the location discussion is kind of diverted from the core issues. Of the core issues. We have to have a fire station. We have to have a police station. We have some vital, critical community facilities, and the location discussion kind of diverted the focus point. And I think your point is well taken that we need to really refocus it back. What we did learn is we do have multiple sites that the facilities can work on, and that can certainly be a discussion that we can engage the public and have a lot more feedback and input if a bond measure is approved. And so we don't have to necessarily identify location. We've done the work. We know it fits. Let's go back to the core issue. These are the facilities we need. Does the public willing to support that? And we could certainly go that direction.
And may I add that maybe this work that from this consultant group is not wasted, because they have identified the sites, they've evaluated, but now maybe based on what they know about the sites, they give an estimate, a median, let's say, of the costs. And some of them are going to be a lot less expensive and some of them are going to be tremendously more expensive, but they can put in a dollar amount now to it, and we can take a middle ground to at least say that we generated that amount of money based on not just subjective, well, we think this is, but we have some concrete data to show for it. And maybe that can be their focus as opposed to helping guide us and have the public debate and about which site they prefer, because it is going to be contentious also. So while we're trying to get a bond measure out, we're going to now be divided in terms of which of the sites to have this on. And I think that's the wrong timing. So I appreciate, Councilwoman, your comments. It's like sometimes we are so involved in the detail that we need to have that fresh perspective, and we have lost sight of that. So I'm hoping that it makes sense now as we talk this through. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. All right, does it make sense for this contract to be amended? Or if it doesn't need to be amended, maybe we can by consensus agree that its scope of work would include something to do with the Citizens Advisory Committee? Or is it too late or not appropriate to have this contract deal with Citizens Advisory Committee? It was a comment coming in from one of our residents.
And Renee can jump in on this. It depends on if you have a Citizens Advisory Committee that is going to be engaging and advocating for a project, we absolutely can't be involved with that at all. That has to be completely independent. And we've had citizens have come up and said they are very interested in leading a citizen advisory group effort. And so that's one side of it. Now
They need to do that. They need to do that on their own.
correct.
If they're going to
advocate for the project.
What if they're going to advise us? What if they're going to advise the city on that site, or include Preston Park ball fields, or don't?
I think that would, especially given your timing, I think that is more appropriate down the road, in that if we focus on the election, on the facilities, and then And if it is approved, then I think that makes a lot of sense to engage a citizen.
To have
advisor.
options after the measure passes for the Citizens Advisory Committee to weigh in on which we ultimately choose to spend the money on.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Point of clarification first, are we talking about a G2 and 3? Because I've heard some council members kind of talk about both. Are we talking about?
Yeah, I think we're
okay.
talking about both.
So on 2, you know, I just want to kind of briefly touch on this idea of what citizens are looking for. And then I'm going to silence myself because I think additional discussion almost counteracts what I'm trying to articulate. But, you know, I think citizens are looking for us to be the leaders, to move quickly, methodically, to be prudent, and to have some level of leadership and assurance that if this bond goes through, that we're going to be able to build these facilities quickly and that the money's not going to devalue over time as we sit on it and argue over sites and everything else. So I think that's why the site selection discussion came about in the first place. I just want to frame it in that context. And then I have a couple of questions about the F or G3 item. Actually, just one. As we look at sites, something that dawned on me that we didn't discuss at the last hearing was just this idea of deed restrictions and easements. You know, I walk out here and I see there's obviously a cut in the pavement that goes into that next property. I went to the park last week and somebody said, I thought this was deeded as only parkland into perpetuity. How sure are we that we understand any deed restrictions and easements associated with the land? And is that part of this contract to ensure that those are well understood by the city?
That is not part of the contract, but it's a point that we can certainly put on our list of things we need to be sure and address and look into.
Now, I don't know how difficult that is, but for me, I want to be 100% sure that we understand that before we even talk about
Okay.
selection. So-
Councilor McCarthy, keep that thought. So when I think there's going to be some building involved. So to make sure that your point is built into it and see if the rest of the council agrees. Because I was going to ask for some things to be put into the motion too. So we'll build it together and try to satisfy everyone.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Biala?
Sorry. Yes, and the scope of work for this new contract
On
can
G3 or G2?
Team Civics, that the scope of work is
Which
not,
architect? I'm sorry, you're talking 10 G2 Civex?
yeah,
Okay, that's 10 G2 then.
yes, that the scope is not so much focused on outreach as it is to generate the cost of building the sites, each of the sites for the language for the bond measure. So it's a little different than public information and outreach.
If you look at section and fact sheets and messaging,
Right.
so
So I'm saying that rather than do that we have them with the assessments that they've done already about each of the sites to generate some idea estimates of the cost of putting our facilities on those sites. Is it okay? All right.
so G3 is, one of the next steps is to give us more cost details.
Right. But if we're going to approve the one that talks about outreach and all of that, then it seems like if we, yeah, but do we really need, well,
So the
I guess we're
outreach,
going to need it.
the outreach
So,
will include
yes,
disseminating information gained
about that.
from the site selection
Mhm,
developers.
Mhm. And we're not at this point going to have as an outcome a particular site that we've all agreed on. I don't think that that should be the focus anymore, but it was before now. That their job was to do the studies, to do the evaluations and reach out to the public and to hear the public's preferences. And I don't think that's appropriate until after we get the bond approved and we have an estimate And we can say, for example, there are 5 different sites. We don't know exactly which one, but in the ballpark, this is what is going to be costing us. And then we have that language in the bond measure. But we're not going to now continue this process of having these public sessions where people are now trying to decide which of the sites they want to be determined now, this year. I don't think we need to do that. Then once the bond measure is approved with a certain dollar amount for it, and people are saying, yes, we agree, we need to repair these things, we need to go, to rebuild new facilities, here's the cost, I'm for it. And then after that, if they approve that with that general amount, then we say, and which site do we think is appropriate? And that's when we do outreach. That's when we do so much more of the thing that we did last session.
Okay. I think what financial work they've done so far gave us a range of cost, but they're not so certain. So I think they want to do more financial assessment so they can give us a range of costs, so we can pass that range of cost on to the public. Because the public told us they want more information before being asked yes or no on a ballot.
Sure.
So it's kind of a chicken egg thing, and
Sure.
we're trying to respond to the public.
Sure. I don't mind doing more assessments if that's where we need to put a dollar amount, but we don't need to put it on the burden of us or the public to decide which site.
Got it. Got it. Yep. So I think we're in agreement. Not everyone outside of this building might agree. Okay, so I'd like to motion that we approve 10G2 for the outreach regarding the bond measure, but that we add to the scope of services under public information that A, developing information messaging and fact sheets, and B and C, on looking at page 7, that the content related to the funding needs to be added to the client's website, used in social media, et cetera, include discussion of why or why not we're selling Preston Park, and why or whether the ball fields are going to be in the mix of what the bond measure pays for. And I need a second, and then we'll go to other people here who, like Brian, who have other things to add. But first, we need a second.
I'll second for the point of discussion.
Okay, let's move to you then, Councilmember
Thank you,
McCarthy.
Mayor. I just, I voiced this before and I'll just voice it again. I continue to have a lot of concern about going down the rabbit hole too much about this issue of selling Preston Park. I think that it just has the potential to create a lot of adversity. And I just think it's really dangerous. I think actually it could derail the whole effort. So I would ask maybe to reconsider how important you think that is for the community.
Well, we've heard from one community leader a few months ago. Tonight, we heard public comment from another community leader. So I think that if we can't respond, other than to say, we didn't consider that, people are going to say, then I don't want to give you money, because there's money you're leaving on the table. But if we can respond and say, like the city manager mentioned, for these reasons, we considered it and dropped it from our analysis as on the website, options considered and rejected. So we can say to the person who says, what about, I heard Preston Park, go to the website, see what it says.
Okay, so you're not talking about putting on a mailer to every house, hey, we're not selling, or we are selling Preston Park and this is why, but maybe like a small blurb on a website or.
Right, I'm saying that the scope of services, when we talk about fact sheets and such, FAQs, that they include reference to the options that we consider.
Okay.
And the kind of thing that Kathy is saying, like, hey, folks, we have a list of sites, but you're going to help decide which one. Okay. It's not that we're trying to duck where the community center is going to go, but we want more information from you before we decide how to spend your money, where to spend your money at a community center. Same thing with the ball fields. It may not be in the ballot mix, but it should be FAQ. So when someone says, what about ball fields? We say, go to the FAQ. It talks about how that's going to be funded outside of the bond measure. But if it's not included in this analysis, then we can't tell them anything really.
Okay. Yeah, my concern was that it would be included in the mailer that goes to the House to talk about the bond measure and,
Well, I was thinking public meetings and things, but it may not make it to the mailer, but there's a committee working on the mailer. So they're hearing you. Kathy and I and staff are hearing you. So, I don't know how to get you in the loop of what goes in the mailer eventually. Probably the subcommittee makes the sausage and then brings it to this council. Whereas in the past few weeks, the committee's been making the sausage and then delivering it.
okay, I feel heard about what my concern is. And I think you both understand and I'm confident you'll move that in the right direction. So thank you, Mayor.
Did you want to add something to the motion?
Not for two, no.
Okay. All right, Councilmember McAdams and then Biala.
Thank you, Mayor. For me, because it's selling of Preston Park has come up multiple times now. I mean, why is it only Preston Park? Why don't we talk about selling the airport? I mean, the city has other assets too. And so for me I could not imagine if I lived at Preston Park to be hearing this, whether it's a full discussion or it's a conceptual discussion or whatever it is. These are people's livelihoods and these are people's homes. And it's a non-starter for me. So I understand where you're coming from. And maybe that's just the headline, is that we're not even, it's a non-starter. We obviously as a council, as a city have goals with regards to housing, with regards to residents, our community, being able to be diverse economically. And so for me, every time Preston Park, the selling of Preston Park, even if it's the concept is brought up, I feel very sad. And I feel very scared. And I couldn't imagine what the residents that live in that live there feel. So I would prefer that we nip that in the bud sooner than later. If the council chooses to, absolutely, I would be open to having an assessment of all of the city assets that could be sold, and yes, Preston Park would be included in that, but to, consistently be like bringing up Preston Park because, a constituent sent an email. I mean, for me, it doesn't make much sense. And I would prefer to not spend any more time on this. So I understand though, to have that addressed in the frequently asked questions. And for me to support that, I would want that message to be, we're not doing it. So I don't know how that gets done. Obviously, you two are in the subcommittee with regards to the mailers, but
Right, but we're not the deciders on Preston Park. So once council made a decision about Preston Park, staff would present what they want to go in the mailer. Kathy and I would have some input on that. And then if you wanted, you could come to this council to see what we recommended as a committee.
sure. And I mean, for me, the sale of Preston Park should go to the voters, quite frankly. I mean, I don't think it should be up to anyone on the dais. I mean, it's such a large city
We're starting to
asset.
get in the
No, I
discussion
know, I
pros
get
and
it.
cons.
Yeah.
But
I
if you
understand.
can relate to the contract when you're speaking about Preston Park, then that's.
Sure. I mean, it's hard to, I mean, obviously it's connected to the outreach and the public information. And I just want the public to be clear, right? Like, I don't want to play telephone where people, oh, they're going to sell Preston Park. Did you hear that? That's going to happen. I mean, unfortunately, that's going to happen. And so how do we stop that? And how do we have our headline be, that's not what the intent is?
Yeah, it's tough because people can say, hey, you hear they're going to do $100 million bond?
Right.
Because we're trying to discuss the sideboards. So we can't stop that. But the sooner we make a decision and the clearer we are on
Yeah,
information,
absolutely.
nip it.
Thank you for indulging me.
Okay, so I wasn't sure, Brian, if you wanted to add something to this. Oh, that was G, the other G. Councilmember Biala?
Thank you again for your comments, Councilmember McAdams. I spoke very strongly about the whole notion of selling Preston Abrams. They're not only part of our financial
So
portfolio.
Kathy, you're getting into the pros
Okay.
and cons as it relates to the contract.
Yes, yes. to me, the whole issue of this contract and the bond issue is that we have made the financial decision as a city that we don't have alternatives. We are not questioning now what the alternatives are. If that were the case, my gosh, we shouldn't be even talking about the bond measure. We have decided as a city, this kind of huge amount of money cannot be generated by the city unless we have a bond measure. It's played out everywhere else that jurisdictions can't afford to build huge centers like this without a bond measure. So we're not opening up at this point to a debate about what other ways we can finance this. I may be wrong, but I'm going to ask the city manager, is that correct? When we have gotten this far to saying that we need a bond measure, it's because no other alternatives are feasible for us to patchwork together and the conditions of the building, et cetera, whatever has gone into that. So that's why we have these contracts. That's why we are targeting a bond measure. Is that not correct? This isn't the time right now to say, what are other alternatives to the bond measure? People might have some questions about it, but we've already made that decision, to my way of thinking. Can you comment about it? Thanks.
We've been discussing this for multiple years now. We've had, I don't know how many community meetings, and the focus has never been on selling our assets. The focus has been on the need for these facilities, and the option, that the best option was determined to be a general obligation bond, and that's been the focus. We've never had a community discussion on, should we start selling off our assets? Should we start, and that could be a whole other discussion. Do you want to sell the airport? Do you want to sell the equestrian center? Do you want to sell our parks? I mean, we have a lot of assets in the city, and I think that would completely derail a bond measure. And so that's a discussion I think to have down the road. My thoughts.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to leave to catch a plane. So, Councilmember McAdams?
So I'd like to make a substitute motion then. I'd like to adopt 10G2 with the caveat regarding the baseball field in the FAQs.
And not Preston Park.
Correct.
Is there a second for that motion?
A second.
Okay.
Did we also include the issues of the financial?
You,
Was that
whatever
on
you
there?
want to put into the motion that's not already in it, you can ask.
Oh,
for
that was on
friendly
the second one though. Never mind.
Yeah, I've got
Okay,
it.
I second.
So, if it's okay, we'll vote on the substitute motion first. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Okay, so that motion passes 3-1 with Mayor Delgado in opposition. And I have to go. So Kathy, you can stay. Is that correct? Mhm. Okay, so someone needs to be the chair. Kathy, can you be the chair? Sure. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
See you in Korea. So we need a motion. Oh, we got a second already, right? Okay. Oh, right, okay. Motion for 10-1. Let's talk about E1. Okay, so we need to have a motion. Okay, and we talked about it. Okay. Okay, so we've been informed that we absolutely need to have a motion for 10E1 on this citywide slurry seal project. So can we entertain a motion, please?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Now we're on 10G3. Okay, this is the that's the architects. It's related to the essentially
Right, that's the
same
second item that
discussion.
I
Yes.
pulled, and I'm happy to move for approval.
Okay. Second?
I will second for discussion. And then I'd like to ask if the motion maker would include the effort to research easements on all the site selections and bring that back to the council so that we kind of know whether we're spinning our wheels. I don't know how much money or time or effort is involved in that.
Absolutely. I'm happy to add that to the motion.
Is that, if I can ask staff, is that reasonable? Is that?
It's probably not something for them, but we can have our staff, our engineers can easily look into that information. So that won't be a problem. Okay.
Is that okay? And I want to ask the city manager about it. It does say here estimated costs for community facilities, but we now have a slightly different focus in that we're not so much looking at individual costs, but we want to generate a sort of estimate of consolidating all the costs for the bond language. Is that different than specifying just estimated costs? Because they will take 5 different sites and tell us the cost of it. And that is good information, but not to help us decide what a good number is that would cover most of the sites.
Yeah, so the focus is not going to be tying a number to the site. The focus is going to be, we have an assessment on the buildings and it will be, this is the cost of a fire station. This is the cost of a police station. This is the cost to develop city offices of the community buildings. And that's what we'll have, and those costs they'll not vary based on
The site. Okay, great. And that you read that in just what's on the motion. Okay, because it doesn't
We clearly
necessarily.
heard that from the discussion. And so I think we're good with that.
Okay, we don't need to have clarifying language, and you would communicate some of what we've discussed tonight.
Yes.
Okay, so having said that, let's see, did we have a second from Brian and discussion, and do we need to add that, Councilwoman McAdams, to the motion about adding the easement?
Yes, a
research of
friendly amendment. Oh,
easements?
yeah, yes,
Yeah,
that's fine. Thank
acceptable.
you.
Okay, all right, so are we, any further discussion?
Yeah, just real quickly, city attorney, I promoted you. City clerk, do you need to confer with city manager? I see you motioning.
We took public
Yeah.
comment on the consent agenda.
Oh, right. Right. Yeah, I forgot. Yes, good. Whew. Okay, so are we ready to vote? Okay, let's have a vote. Roll call. Don't know for consent. Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, so now, geez, J1. And this was pulled by Councilmember McCarthy. So would you like to go ahead and talk about it?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to suggest that with the approval of the council that we move this to the next agenda. I think that it would be helpful if staff that was involved in planning, more staff was here. It would be helpful if I think my colleagues on the council were all present. Does that sound reasonable and doable? Because otherwise, I'd like to have a fairly substantial discussion, and I'm just not sure that tonight's the right for that.
For some feedback, yeah. The council just had directed within 6 months, you want to report back. The council wants a more in-depth discussion. We can certainly schedule it on a future agenda to have that discussion. So at least the report is back to the council. The next council meeting is going to be kind of busy. You're going to have a conditional use permit appeal for the MSG site. We're going to have the county is going to be making a discussion about their housing element and opportunity site. So I think that's going to be a busy meeting, but maybe one of our meetings in June, if that would be okay.
Yeah, that would be good with me. I don't want to, obviously I don't want it to be forgotten, but it seems to me that, the staff report in our packet says that not a single application, if I'm reading it right, was granted, and yet,
I think it's not granted. It's just not, wasn't applied for.
Applied for.
So there's two different things.
Okay.
We didn't have, there was not any interest in, no one came in to apply for an application. There just hasn't been interest in that. But we can still schedule that and give you a more in-depth report on that and have a discussion on that.
City council person, do we need to have a motion to table this to a date uncertain in June? Or can we just say that they will come back?
I think you can just say that we'll bring it back.
Okay.
So,
All right. So it's a date uncertain, but sometime in June. That'd be okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. So I think we're finished with that one. And did you ask your question on M1? Oh, this one we're going to table also. We're going to bring it up as a future agenda item about the interview process and for the planning commission and maybe other commissions as well.
Yes.
Yeah, the process is going to come back. They already approved that.
We already, yes, but the process, we will note that in the minutes as well. Okay, so I think we're done with the consent agenda. And let's see, any other action items? No other action items. None. So now we're at council and staff informational reports. Mayor Delgado had to leave early, and any other reports? City manager, maybe?
I can just give a quick report. Mayor Delgado, so they just give the council an update on the SMART goals. And this is probably the first time Councilmember McAdams has heard about these. And these are that started over a while back last year in my performance review process. There's some goals that the council want us to look at as a city, and they've formed into subcommittees. The mayor and Councilmember McCarthy was on one subcommittee, and Councilmember Fiala and Fisher were on another. And they kind of came up with these goals to focus on. And so I can just give you a quick update. The biggest one I think I want to update on is the IT software for our public works department. And our staff has been working on that. They've looked at a lot of different programs. They've narrowed it down to 6, and then they narrowed it down to 3. In the meantime, we've lost our public works director. We've lost our assistant city manager, her leading that process. We have a back-end package that we think we like, but now we need to look at the interface for that, which is the primary interest of the council. So it's going to be a couple months while we're looking at the interface package that'll work with the back end. And so we're hoping we get a public works director on board that in a few months we'll be bringing a proposal, a software package back to the council to approve. So we're moving forward on that. It's going to be delayed a little bit with the loss of our public works director and assistant city manager. The other goal kind of related to that was one on just the condition of city facilities. And so we've all the different departments have been working on cleaning up the areas. The public works actually redid their whole area. Our staff recently went through the kitchen area and our lobby areas they've been working on. The next part of that is bringing in a design consultant to look at really cleaning up. And I think that is, we kind of want to see where the bond election is going to go. And if we move forward with that, then we probably don't want to spend a lot of money on carpeting and painting. But if it's not going to move forward, then we probably do want to bring the design consultant in, because then we'll be looking at things like that. So it's moving along. We need a couple of months on that. The other succession plans, we've given those back to the council. The park maintenance plans we've given back to council. The other big one that we just need to get our public works director back is putting our maintenance plan for all of our infrastructure and all of our facilities, and we're working on that, but we just need to get our public works team back in place on that. So it's going to take a little bit longer, and that's just the high level report on those goals.
Any comments from council?
Chair, thank you. Quick comment on the IT software. That's a subcommittee that I sit on, and I continue to be tremendously excited about the potential that this can bring to the city. I mean, it'll fundamentally change the way we listen to our residents, the way we engage with our residents, the way that we track issues and problems and understand trends and things of that nature. You mentioned, that some back-end software is being considered, and I'm wondering, I assume that the purchase of that will come to council, but before that happens, can it come to the subcommittee just for a quick review to make sure it meets all the kind of bullet points that we were concerned about?
Yeah, absolutely. Would be. I think that's probably a really good suggestion. Have you look at that?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? I have a short one in that I was on the facility infrastructure maintenance, and I hope that we are still going to work on this despite even with the bond approval, because new facilities could be 5 years in the making, and there are just some things that I think it's worthwhile to spend, even if it's carpeting in a particular area, because it's so awful. So I hope that we're not setting this up, that we put on hold everything, in the event that the bond measure passes, nothing will be done. I just hope that's not our idea.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
And I think that was council's very clear on that, on the
Great.
goals and that.
Great, because I do want some carpet temporarily restored. Okay, great. So I think that's it. What I think I skipped any council reports on meetings or conferences attended. Nothing. Okay, so I think we're at adjournment, and we can be adjourned at 8:17. Thank you, everyone.